Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Fireside Content Chat. My name is Elizabeth Irvin. I'm the VP of Marketing for MarketMuse, and I'm joined today by Chris Savage, co-founder and CEO of Wistia.
Hi.
Hi, Chris. Can you, for those who may not be familiar with you and Wistia, can you provide a quick overview?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Wistia is a video marketing platform. So it's hosting, analytics, tools to present video on your site, tools to make video really easily, all that kind of stuff, like educational materials, all those different types of things. And we've been at it for a while. Wistia started 15 years ago. So we're not your average tech company. We did a big buyback using debt a few years ago to take control of our business. From angels. And I would say one of the things that people really know Wistia for is we've made a huge amount of content, a huge amount of investment in teaching people how to make video, how to think about video in their business, how to think about series of videos, like when you should be making which type, all that kind of stuff. So super excited to be here with you today to talk about that.
Yes, excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. And today we'll dig into how we can help organizations lead with creativity in their video storytelling. And we're big fans of Wistia. We're customers. Some of our sessions at this event are streamed through Wistia. So
Awesome.
Thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you.
So let's set the stage before we get into some specifics. How do you define video storytelling?
Yeah, I think video storytelling for me is your opportunity to tell a story and connect with an audience on a timeline. And that's really important because there's lots of different ways that people can consume content. Obviously, they can skim and scan written text, and the text is amazing for that. They can listen, but if you have folks that want to be told a story, they want to be told it in order, they're trying to understand something really complicated, that's where video storytelling works really well. And that's how I think about video storytelling. And I would also say, that it's, a lot of the stuff that does best in video is the stuff that really does well in person. It does well when it's like one-to-one. And so when you're looking at your business and you're looking at opportunities, just look at where, if you have people involved, and that often gets people to the next stage, gets them excited, keeps them being a happy customer, helps them understand how to use your product. That's often a place where video can help.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. If someone were starting from scratch, or if they're going through a rebrand, how should they think about what makes a good company story if they were crafting that story from the beginning and translating that in video form?
Yeah, great question. I think it starts with the customer, and it starts with your audience. So who is your audience and what do they care about? And then you have to go to your own story and say, which parts of my story are most relevant for the audience? So for example, let's say in support, people are always praising your company for how easy it is to use your product. You might not say that on your website. You might not talk about it in your videos today, but if that's the type of thing that's coming up, that's probably something that they care about enough to tell you. And that's probably something that you should be incorporating into your story. But a great story has drama. A great story has emotion. A great story is authentic. And I think we all care about the brands and the values of the companies that we do business with. And so when you're thinking about how do you tell your story today, it's like trying to figure out how to be as true to yourself as possible. Showcase your values. Don't be afraid to scare some people away if that means you're going to bring other people closer. And then you just want to figure out like what story, what conversation do you have the right to enter? And that's about understanding your audience really well. And if you can get that all right, then you can make something that's super compelling and that motivates people to take action.
Oh, I love that. And it's interesting about where you enter and how you're telling that story. That's a really interesting point. Do you have a recommendation for a framework to guide this? Whether it's starting with some of those conversations that you've had with customers or investors or founding story, or is there a framework that can help guide that?
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of my answers are going to be, it comes back to the customer, but like I think like founding story is a really good example of something that is extremely compelling to the right customer and to I'll give you more specific. If you're selling to early adopters and you're in a space that's really new, they care about founding story. In fact, they want founding story, right? And they also want, like, if you're a 3-person company, they actually like that because it's like, wow, I'm taking a risk, I'm trying something new. And you can feel like you shouldn't tell people that we are 3 people. But if you are making something that's truly for early adopters, that is why they're going to care. It's because of the 3 people who are involved and what their story is. Versus if you're selling to a much more mature market and you have competitors and everyone understands what the competitors do really well, and you're different in some way that is price, ease of use, brand, those customers are going to probably not care as much about the founding story. They're going to care more about like the value you're delivering and how you're differentiated. And so I go back to like, you have to try to be as crystal clear as possible about who you want to talk to today. And I mean, the big thing that I see that people screw up is that they try to make one video that works for everyone. And that's because video can feel intimidating. It can feel scary to get on camera. It can feel scary to record something. Even though you and I are having a conversation right now, we're on video, we're all on Zoom, we're all used to it now. It still is like intimidating. And so they try to wrap too much into it. And the problem is when you do that, you have too many goals for any piece of content, video, text, anything. It becomes extremely hard to evaluate if you're working and if it's working and how to improve it. And so my suggestion is to get as targeted as possible so that if you go talk to those people who are your right target customer, they're like, yes, this resonated with me, or no, it didn't. And here's why. And then take that feedback and improve it. But if you can't make it targeted enough, then you can't really figure out how to improve.
I have like 3 questions just based off of that.
Yeah, let's go.
But so the targeting makes sense. And that's something that a lot of people are thinking about for their website interactions, segmentation, email. I think going back to the scary part of video too is the scaling the production of that. Yeah. So if you were to, how targeted should people get, and should they focus on a specific segment first, or how should they break it down?
I mean, I would look at your overall customer segments, and my suggestion is, like, as a business, you should try to figure out who you're targeting. If you don't know, I understand that again, I have been there many times. I've had the conversations that I said to people like, my customer could be anyone. It could be this marketer, it could be this salesperson, it could be this training person. I go through the list, and I got really good advice long ago, which was like, if you're a good fit for people, like, they can find your product, understand that it'll work for them. But you're selling to early adopters, like, people ignore what's on websites anyway, and they just figure out how to use products, like, at that stage. So it doesn't actually hurt you to get targeted. You just learn faster, ultimately. And so I think as a marketing organization, or if you are a startup as a founding team, you just want to say, who is the top segment, who is the next one and the next one. And if you want to learn as quickly as possible if they are, the right customer for you. And then when it comes to video production, I wouldn't go spend, if you don't have a big budget, I would not go spend a lot of money on a professional launch video that's for a hyper targeted segment. I would start with simple stuff. I would start with authenticity. I would start with, making the videos yourself. And you can do that. There's a lot of tools that let you do this now. We have one called Soapbox. There's a great one called Loom. You can use QuickTime to start. You just got to use something to get feedback. So it doesn't have to be intimidating, but I would match the production risk to the risk you can take in your business. And so if you've raised a lot of money and you have a big budget, like, everyone who you've raised money from knows that you're taking larger risks, and they expect you to probably spend the money on the, flashier, bigger, more expensive video. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. It's just a more expensive learning, a different way of doing it. So I would just match the production to the types of risks you're taking around the other parts of your business.
Yeah, that makes sense. You had also mentioned something about a big mistake that you see people making. What are some of the other mistakes that you see that just over and over again that you just want to tell people no?
Yeah, I would say so that mistake is like people trying to do too many things in one video. And the other thing is just trying to rely on one video. If your strategy is, all right, I'm going to make my one video and it's going to go viral, like that's not going to work. The number of companies that have been built by like a true viral video that was not like a huge budget promotion and all this other stuff is very small. It's like Dollar Shave Club. That's it. It's a very, very few companies that really had a launch video that went viral that like made the business. So I think it is much more of like, hey, you should figure out how you want to consume stuff and talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your customers. Like, how do people want to consume stuff today? And it's changed. And one of the biggest changes is that the audience gets to control how they interact. And so some people just like to lean back and watch. And some people like to skim and read. And some people like to listen. And so you really have to look around the places where you're talking to customers and say, which of these places should we let someone skim? Which of these places do we also need to let them watch? Which of these places should we let them listen? And when you do that, you realize there's lots and lots of places to add video, just like there's lots of places to add audio that I think go overlooked. And so it's much less that's the big mistake, is like thinking that one video is going to change the business, when it's actually just adding a layer to your communications, which when done properly can make your business feel more human, more approachable, can make your values get across really quickly, you can explain things on a timeline and in a story fashion that's very hard to do in other mediums. So that's how I would think about it, and something that it's very common to see mistakes on.
That leads to another question I had, which is really around video being thought of as having a specific purpose within the buyer's journey. How can you elegantly take your company's story and incorporate it throughout in those different instances with the different segments? When and how should people think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just look at it as like, this is such a simple thing, but like go to a page and say, if I was explaining this to someone in person, what would I say? And see if there's anything missing. And if it's something that can be added with text, add it. Like, and if it's something that feels like, maybe it's showcasing a customer who's using that feature, then put it on there. Like it's actually a very, very, very simple thing. But if you've written a lot of copy, it is hard. It is hard to make copy really good and really clear and really targeted. It is a science and an art, like in one. And video is similar. And so I would just say, like, look for those spots and ask that question, and it will start to become out. And now, obviously, if you have a page and there's 5 people going to it, you have another page that's 50,000 people going to it, probably wouldn't start with the 5-person one. But like, maybe it's the best 5 people and you should. So, that's how I would think about it.
Cool. We'll definitely be adding that to our list. We're written content, obviously, with our yes. company. So we have a lot of work to do on the video side, and we're definitely ramping up this year, but that's such a great way of thinking about it. So we'll definitely be considering that. How do you determine what type of video? So there's animated, there's showing the product and having a voiceover. You can have people. And how do you decide who should be in those videos?
So these are like brand decisions and customer decisions. So I think, like, again, like I usually would say, if animation does really well when you have abstract content, the abstract concepts you need to explain, because you have no limit to what is on screen, right? So like, if there is something conceptual that is really important for people to understand, this often happens in new markets, then that's a place I would look at animation and say, is there a way that we can explain this using analogies, using metaphors, something like very visually that we don't want any bounds on, or like we can't get people together in person, like then I would say animation is a good place to look at that. But a lot of this comes down to, like, again, like, what stage is your company at? What are the expectations you're trying to build with your brand? What are the values you're trying to get across? And that should really help dictate like the type of video that you're making. And so if your brand is about like, taking big creative risks, you can get away with a very, very different thing than if you are trying to market yourselves based on the security of your product. The security is going to have to be a little bit more toned down. It's going to have to be, the visuals and the people and the stuff you're showing is just going to have to like back that up. And so a lot of this is like comes back to brand and brand values. The challenge you run into, I would say, is a lot of companies don't have that established, especially early. And so if that's the case, and you're kind of like, you don't really think you have a brand established, you do, whether or not you realize it. So I would follow, in that case, your instinct. And if your instinct says we should have people on camera, then put them on camera. If your instinct says animation, then do that. But it's like as your marketing gets more mature and the brand gets more defined, the style and tone gets more defined. That should help define like what types of videos you're making as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've been talking a lot about brand maturity and moving from various stages, and investment was a big part of that in terms of driving scalability to video creation. Are there any other factors that you think could potentially trigger in a team's mind that maybe we should revisit some of these videos? Because I know from experience too, once you create them, as you said, it could be one, but you want to hold on to it for as long as possible because it took time. And so how do you recognize that there needs to be
they need to go back and fix it or update it?
Yeah, or rebirth or something to evolve the story.
Yeah, that's a hard one because obviously, as you're saying, like if you make a video and it's working well or you're really proud of it, then you don't want to change it usually because it's hard. But I just try to look at like how, as much as possible, I try to remove the fact that it's a video from the fact that it's content. And so if you're making content, like, and this was written, would I change it? Like, is it far off or is it not worth it? Like, and if it's feeling far off to you, it is probably feeling far off to other folks. And so is there a way of reframing the stuff on the page that sets up what the video is differently, or using it in a different context where you could talk about older things you were doing or something. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to like, if you're looking at it and it feels like you've evolved past it, you probably do need to update it, which again, like this is where the math of video gets like, if you think of each thing as a bespoke external production, one at a time thing, it can feel intimidating because they're like, well, I just made a launch video. Should I make another one? Versus the reality is, if you're changing your business a lot and you do have, new things to launch, you're changing what your company is or what your product is on some basis. You should expect that you're going to be changing those videos. And you actually should be, if you're working with external production, you should tell them that up front. You're like, hey, we're fast moving. We're changing a lot. I know we were initially talking about one thing, but what would it look like if we updated this every 6 months? And you're going to get a better deal. And they're going to get up to speed faster on the other ones. And it's actually going to financially make more sense. And so we see a lot of people who start like that. And then they eventually hire someone internally who is the producer who works through this stuff. And that's when all the math starts to change because it can get incredibly cheap to make content, to make video at scale if you know what you want it to be for and who's making it, and if the style is similar and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Speaking of math, do you, in terms of production needs, and if you're using internal resources or external, do you have recommendations for executing a thorough, elegant story on a tight budget?
Yeah.
What does that look like? We have a range of visitors here, and we have some large organizations and some one-person organizations. So what advice would you give, especially for smaller teams on a tighter budget?
Yeah, on a tight budget, you can do this yourself. The simplest way to do it is make a keynote or a PowerPoint. You're going to record yourself with something like Soapbox that lets you record your webcam and your screen simultaneously and then add edits in between. And as long as you're making something that isn't too long, your tactic is not going to be, how do I edit this to make it perfect? It's going to be like, how do I practice this so that this 2-minute thing I'm going to walk through comes across as feeling as professional as I want it to feel. And we're all used to being in conversations where people pause, where people say, where they say a word and they correct themselves. And we don't look at those people as being stupid. We look at that as like normal conversation. So I think that's one of the things to break through on the low budget side is like, we're all used to authentic stuff. We all just lived through a pandemic. Everyone's been at home. Like the playing field has been leveled. Like a lot of us are still at home because we like working at home. Like I just think it's like expectations have changed quite a bit. And so you can make something yourself and you'd be shocked by how good it can be if you just practice what you want to say like 5 times, as long as it's only a couple minutes long. And then you can build onto that where, you can get an external webcam for $200. You can get an external light for $50, and you can take something and make it look much better. And you just incrementally invest so that you have something you can start for free. And as you feel like it's working, you can invest a little bit more. And then at the point where you're really sold, you feel like it's really working. Yes, you can get a fancier camera. You can get better lights. You can work with someone externally. You can hire someone to get you set up with like something like I have, which is just like an extra camera and an extra light. Like it's very simple, but knowing how to set it up is the hard part. So all of those things I would say are at your disposal, but it's hard to invest before you've done anything. It's hard to invest without getting any positive feedback or any feedback at all. And so I just suggest like, how do you start in the smallest way? And it doesn't have to be your front page video. It can be a video to one customer or one partner, to a new employee, to someone you're recruiting. And you'd be surprised how just a small video for the right person can affect and change someone's actions. And when you see that, it becomes just much easier to invest in doing something bigger.
I love the stepping stones of investment. That makes a lot of sense to just use what's on your computer and test it out and then slowly increase from there. And I know a couple of people on our team and a bunch of others have quite the setup behind their desks, and with a lot of practice in there. And so I think that's a great piece. So you had mentioned the lights and cameras. Is there anything else? Any other tools or tricks that people can consider when they're thinking about sort of upgrading their gear?
Yeah, if they're doing it themselves, it's a light, a camera, and a microphone. I mean, that is the simplest thing. We actually have a bunch of kits that you can look at if you search for Soapbox Station. We basically set up like things to help people, build a better webcam setup. And there's budgets from like $50 to, a few thousand. But yeah, I would start with that, and you can just incrementally improve it over time. But again, like we're used to seeing people, sitting in their kitchen, with someone walking in the background. Like it's like the expectations have just really shifted. And like I think if more than ever, what it's causing is like, if there's a huge amount of content available, we want content that's for us. We want content that's like right on the nose, that's like very targeted. And that's authentic and real. And so I would just encourage you to focus on those aspects. And like your lighting doesn't have to be perfect. And if your message is on, but is on point, people will resonate. It will resonate with people.
You'd mentioned this a couple of times with resonating, and if it's a good video, do you have internally or something that you profess externally? What does good look like? Do you have benchmarks that you could share?
Yeah, so we look at engagement of the video relative to length. So like, a shorter video, let's say 1 minute to 2 minutes long, a really good video is going to have like 80% of people are going to watch it all the way through. And as videos get longer, the attention spans drop. So, an hour-long video, if 15% of people are watching all the way through, that's like quite good. And that's fine. If you think about the amount of time that someone's spending with your brand, if that could be fantastic for a strategy, but that's how you think about it. And then the other thing is everyone wants data. Of course, you can, if you're at scale, if you have tens of thousands of monthly visitors, you can take the data, look at the video viewing, and you can tie it into your marketing tech stack, and you can see the impact on revenue. It's not that hard. It's actually pretty easy. It's like, show me people who watch videos. Now show me how they acted, or show me people who watch specific videos. Now, how did they act? So you can get the ROI, but most people, if they're starting, you're not gonna be able to do that. But there is this magical thing called qualitative feedback. And you just ask people, did you see this video? And you pay attention in your support and your sales and your success processes, like, is it coming up? And you'd be surprised by, 10 people watching something. If they all say it's good, it's probably good. If they all say it's confusing, it's probably confusing. If they all say it's bad, it's probably bad. And I think we forget that in a world with like unlimited data, but a little bit of qualitative feedback goes a long way towards getting the understanding of if something's resonating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Customers. So you had just mentioned customers and support. Apart from onboarding and training, what videos could people think about for their customers specifically? Yeah,
I think, I don't know if you would classify this as training, but like whenever you're making something new, you should be explaining it how you'd explain it to someone who doesn't use your product. And you should also be explaining it to existing customers. You should be trying to activate them and get them engaged with the new things and teach them. I think there's a lot of times we only want to make content just around our product, and that's missing the opportunity to make content around our mission. And so I would look at like, what are all the other ways that you help customers or would help them in support? Or if you met them at a conference and they ask you questions about things that aren't directly related to what you do, you can make content about all of those things. And in fact, like that's often going to be how you build your brand, is by helping people in other ways that are not directly about your product. Or maybe it's in ways that are not about your product today, and eventually you will have a product for that thing. So I look at it as ways to scale people time. And if there's any time that your team or you are helping customers, you should look at that and say, is there some opportunity here to take this from like doing this one-to-one every time, and can I make this one-to-many? And just when you start to look at the world that way, there's like an infinite amount of content to create. And so then it comes back to like, well, which of these is highest leverage? Which of these is most differentiated? Which of these do we have the right to speak to? Or which of these are no one else talking about? And I would try to like sort through the opportunity in that way. And so then when you're making things, it tends to be, hopefully you're making the most impactful thing you can at any given moment.
Oh, great advice. Well, we are coming up on the half hour. So I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing all of your insights and details. Where can people find you?
First of all, thanks for having me. This is super fun. And you can find all of the content I'm talking about and like how to more of that at wistia.com. I am on Twitter at csavage. I also have a podcast called Talking Too Loud that is about entrepreneurial and creative journeys. That's like wherever you listen to podcasts. So yeah, any of those places is great.
Oh, very cool. Definitely check that out. Great podcast name as well, by the way.
I can't help it. I do talk too loud. So.
Well, thank you so much again. And hopefully we can catch up soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.